The sun filtered through the tall glass windows of the Kawar mansion, casting golden reflections onto the white marble floors. From the outside, everything about the house screamed perfection: immaculate hedges, sleek black gates, luxury cars neatly aligned in the driveway. But inside, the air was thick with unspoken words, sidelong glances, and a deep, sinking tension that had become part of daily life. The chandelier sparkled above the grand foyer, but even its light couldn't reach the growing darkness in the hearts that lived beneath it. Eliza sat alone in the reading lounge, one hand resting on her rounded belly, the other clutching a cup of herbal tea that had long gone cold. Her delicate features were pale, her eyes tired from sleepless nights. At 8 months pregnant, she carried not only her unborn child, but also the unbearable weight of loneliness. The baby kicked gently, and Eliza smiled faintly, murmuring soothing words. "You're not alone, my love. I'm here. I'll protect you." Her voice quivered, betraying the very words she was trying to believe. She looked around the room that once echoed with laughter and warmth. The couch where she and Armand would curl up together after long days. The fireplace where he'd once knelt and kissed her growing bump, whispering dreams about their family's future. But those days felt like a distant memory now. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, once theirs, now his and Sabine's, came the faint sound of laughter. Sabine's laugh, high-pitched and calculated, sliced through the silence like a knife. Armand was with her again. He had been for weeks now. What began as a secret affair had become blatant. Sabine no longer pretended to be a guest. Her clothes were in the wardrobe. Her perfume lingered in the hallways. Her voice often gave commands to the staff. And worst of all, Armand let it happen. Sabine was a storm wrapped in silk. Gorgeous, charismatic, but with a cruel edge that hid behind a carefully crafted smile. Ever since she had stepped into their lives, things had changed. Armand had grown distant, his once soft eyes now cold and unreadable. Where there had been kindness, there was now suspicion. He questioned Eliza constantly, about what she ate, who she talked to, whether she was faking symptoms for attention. It was all Sabine's doing. She had masterfully begun to poison Armand's mind against his own wife. With subtle comments, feigned concern, and exaggerated stories, she painted Eliza as manipulative, weak, and emotionally unstable. "I think she's pretending," she had whispered one night when she knew Armand could hear. "She just wants you back under her control. She doesn't want to share you." Eliza knew Sabine's game, but every time she tried to speak to Armand, he shut her down, his patience thinner with each passing day. "You always find something to complain about," he snapped once when she asked him why Sabine had been ordering the maids around. "Maybe if you acted more like my wife, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." Those words haunted her. She didn't cry anymore, there were no tears left. Just a hollow ache in her chest and a creeping fear that something terrible was coming. The house, once her haven, now felt like a gilded prison. The walls whispered betrayal. The air tasted of lies. And Eliza, glowing with life, stood on the edge of a crumbling love, praying her child would never feel the emptiness that had taken over her heart. Sabine paced in front of the vanity mirror, adjusting the thin strap of her silk robe, her perfectly lined lips curving into a smirk. From the reflection, she could see the luxurious bedroom that once belonged to Armand and Eliza. Now, it was hers. The satin sheets, the designer candles, even the subtle dimming lights that Armand had installed years ago for romantic nights with his wife, everything now existed for Sabine's comfort. Yet, beneath all that luxury, something gnawed at her, a cold, burning jealousy she couldn't shake off. It wasn't Armand's money. She had tasted that long enough to be satisfied. It wasn't even Armand himself, although his charm still had its pull. It was that woman, Eliza, with her swollen belly and soft, enduring silence. Sabine had watched Armand's eyes linger, just a little too long, when Eliza walked by. Even if he no longer touched her, even if he barely spoke to her, some part of him was still tied to Eliza, and worse, to the child growing inside her. The baby. That was the root of it all. That baby was the anchor holding Armand back. A living reminder of a life he once shared with someone else. Every kick inside Eliza's womb was a threat to Sabine's place in the mansion, a challenge to her reign. She knew men like Armand. They played with desire, but when it came to family, they fell for sentiment. If the baby came and he held it, what then? What if he wanted to go back? No. That couldn't happen. She needed to destroy the image of Eliza in his eyes. She had to convince him that Eliza wasn't just a fading lover, she was a manipulative, emotionally unstable woman using a child to trap him. And Sabine had learned that whispers often worked better than confrontation. She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She sowed doubt like poison vines. Armand, she purred one evening, tracing her fingers lazily over his chest as he lay beside her, half asleep. Have you noticed how she watches us? Like she's waiting for something to go wrong. It's almost obsessive. He shifted, saying nothing. Sabine continued, voice soft and concerned. I just worry about you. What if she does something to hurt the baby? Or herself? I've read about women like her. They fake illnesses, manipulate emotions. You're under so much pressure already. Her words were always wrapped in concern, never aggression. Slowly, she began to shape Armand's perception, building on his exhaustion, his guilt, and his pride. Whenever Eliza asked to speak to him, Sabine would find a way to interrupt, faking a headache, pulling him into a conversation, or suddenly needing his help with something trivial. When Eliza cried, Sabine would appear behind Armand and say gently, she's always crying, isn't she? Maybe it's not just pregnancy hormones. Every gesture from Eliza was reinterpreted by Sabine. Every sigh became manipulation. Every plea became guilt-tripping. And the more Armand listened, the more he began to withdraw. Why don't you rest in the other wing tonight? He said one night to Eliza, not even meeting her eyes. You look tired. Sabine's presence is making you uncomfortable, clearly. That was when Eliza understood just how deep Sabine's poison had sunk. Sabine had wrapped herself around Armand like a vine, seductive and convincing, until he no longer recognized the truth. Eliza was no longer his companion. She had become an inconvenience, a complication he didn't know how to handle. And every time Sabine saw Eliza clutch her belly and walk away, broken and silent, she felt a twisted satisfaction. But deep down, the baby's very existence was a war she hadn't yet won. And that terrified her more than she let anyone see. The walls seemed to grow colder each day, and the silence heavier. Eliza sat by the window of the guest room Armand had quietly reassigned her to, her fingers resting on her belly while her eyes stared blankly at the withering garden below. Her phone, once her lifeline to the outside world, had disappeared days ago. She had asked the maid, then the house manager, each shrugged or claimed ignorance. Armand, when she confronted him, simply said, "It's for your own good. You need rest, not stress from social media or pity calls from your friends." That was the beginning of her isolation. The staff that used to greet her with warm smiles and quiet respect now avoided her completely. Meals were placed outside her door, not a word exchanged. If she stepped into the kitchen to ask for fruit or medicine, the servants exchanged uncomfortable glances and busied themselves elsewhere. It was as if she had become invisible. Or worse, an intruder in her own home. She missed her mother, her sister, her best friend Hiba. No one had called in days. And she had no way to reach them. Each hour passed like fog, blurring into the next, and she felt her energy draining not just from her body, but from her spirit. The baby shifted inside her, a soft flutter against the silence, the only thing grounding her to this world. Nights were the worst. She used to fall asleep in Armand's arms, his hand resting protectively on her stomach, whispering promises about the future. Now she lay alone on one side of the large bed, the other side untouched and cold. From the corridor, she would sometimes hear laughter, music, and once, just once, Sabine's voice moaning Armand's name. That night, she curled into herself and covered her ears, trying to block out the sound that broke what little strength she had left. Memories attacked her without mercy. Armand standing at the beach, holding her hand as they watched the sunset the day he proposed. The time he knelt before her with a positive pregnancy test in hand, eyes filled with joy. The long drives where they sang along to the radio, his hand never leaving hers. All of it played in her mind like a cruel joke. Where had that man gone? How had he become this stranger who could barely look at her? Her hands trembled constantly now. She was eating less, sleeping less, breathing less. Some days, she'd sit in front of the mirror and try to speak to herself, to affirm she was still alive, still worthy. But even her voice sounded foreign. She wore the same few dresses, too tired to care. Her glow had faded. Her eyes were sunken. Her feet swelled from standing too long waiting at the door for Armand to visit. He never did. She tried once, in desperation, to go to his room. But before she could knock, Sabine opened the door in a silk robe, her eyes scanning Eliza like she were a pest. "He's sleeping," she said with a smirk. "He doesn't want to be disturbed. Especially not by drama." Eliza had walked back to her room with shaking legs. That night, she didn't cry. The tears had dried up long ago. Now there was only stillness. And a feeling deep inside her chest, growing like a shadow, something terrible was coming. Something that would change everything. And no one would be there to stop it. Rain crashed against the mansion windows like waves pounding on a sinking ship. Thunder rumbled across the sky, shaking the foundations of the estate. But inside, something even darker was brewing. Something far more violent than the storm outside. Eliza stood in the hallway near the stairs, one hand on her back, the other on her belly. The baby had been restless all day, kicking and turning, as if sensing the storm both outside and within the walls of their home. She had ventured out of her room because she hadn't eaten all day. Her request for food had gone unanswered, and her legs, though aching and swollen, carried her toward the kitchen with hope that she might find a few scraps to ease her dizziness. As she passed the living room, a voice stopped her. Sharp. Cold. "What are you doing out of your hole?" Sabine stood at the edge of the hallway, barefoot and livid, her arms crossed over her silk nightgown. Her eyes gleamed with something darker than irritation. There was venom in her stare. "I just needed something to eat," Eliza said softly, keeping her voice calm. She had learned not to provoke. Her gaze stayed low, submissive. "Oh right," Sabine sneered, taking a step closer. "The weak, helpless little wife, always pretending she's too delicate to move. You've been playing sick for weeks now. What is it today? Hunger? Fatigue? A little backache?" "I'm 8 months pregnant, Sabine," Eliza whispered, voice trembling. Sabine let out a bitter laugh. "Pregnant? Yeah. And we're just supposed to believe it's Armand's baby, aren't we?" Eliza's heart skipped a beat. Her lips parted in shock. "What? I've seen the way you've been acting. Like a victim. You think this baby will save your marriage? That Armand will come running back once he holds your bastard child?" Sabine's voice rose with every word, fury building like the thunder outside. Before Eliza could respond, Sabine disappeared behind the bar in the lounge and emerged with something glinting in her hand. A long, thin, steel curtain rod. Eliza's breath caught. She took an instinctive step back, hands clutching her belly protectively. "Sabine, don't, please. Don't do this." But Sabine's eyes were wild. "You've manipulated him enough. I won't let you win." With a scream, Sabine lunged. The rod came down fast. Eliza cried out as the cold steel slammed against her arm. She stumbled back, crashing into a side table, but stayed upright, shielding her belly with both hands. "Please," she sobbed. "Stop, you'll hurt the baby." Sabine wasn't listening. She struck again, this time across Eliza's shoulder. Then again, lower, catching her on the hip. Eliza screamed in pain, falling to her knees, tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking with each breath. "Say it," Sabine shouted, raising the rod again. "Say it's not his. Admit it. It is his." Eliza cried. "Please, I'm not lying. Please stop." But the rain and thunder drowned out her pleas, and Sabine's fury had spiraled beyond reason. Another blow landed on Eliza's side, and she collapsed fully now, sobbing and curling into herself on the floor. Her hands never left her belly, whispering prayers through clenched teeth. The world spun around her, blinding pain, the taste of blood, the coldness of marble against her cheek. And then, as if possessed by something inhuman, Sabine grabbed Eliza by the wrist and began dragging her toward the front door. "You don't belong here anymore," she spat. "You're just dead weight." The door burst open, wind howling into the foyer. Rain lashed against them as Sabine pulled the pregnant woman out onto the porch. Eliza's cries were muffled by the storm. She tried to crawl, to beg, but Sabine had no mercy left. With one final push, Sabine shoved Eliza down the steps into the mud-soaked ground outside. Lightning cracked across the sky as Eliza landed with a painful cry, clutching her belly with trembling arms. "You're nothing but trash," Sabine hissed. "Stay out of this house. Forever." She slammed the door shut, locking it behind her, while the storm raged on. Eliza lay there in the rain, barely conscious, bruised and broken, the cold seeping into her bones. Her baby shifted weakly, and she whispered through bloodied lips, "Please, hold on." Then everything went dark. The rain had finally softened into a steady drizzle by the time Rahana spotted the figure on the roadside, half hidden behind an overturned trash bin. She had been on her way home from the flower market, the last few wilting roses clutched tightly in her shawl, when she noticed the broken shape lying motionless in the mud. At first, she thought it was a discarded mannequin, lifeless, pale, still. But as she stepped closer, she saw the rise and fall of a chest, the torn fabric of a once elegant dress, and a face smeared with blood and rain. "Oh God," Rihanna whispered, dropping her flowers. She hurried to the woman's side and knelt beside her. The woman's skin was ice cold, her arms wrapped around her belly in a protective hold even in unconsciousness. Rihanna's eyes widened at the sight of the swelling. She was pregnant. Badly hurt. Maybe dying. "Please wake up," she said gently, shaking her shoulder. There was no response. Rihanna was not a strong woman by any means, but desperation made her hands quick and her mind sharper. With shaking arms, she flagged down a passing rickshaw. The driver hesitated when he saw the bleeding woman, but one look at Rihanna's panic-stricken face and he nodded. Together, they managed to lift Eliza into the back seat, Rihanna cradling the woman's head on her lap as the rickshaw raced toward the nearest clinic. Inside the small, underfunded clinic on the outskirts of the city, doctors rushed to stabilize Eliza. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. Her arm was possibly fractured. And most frightening of all, the baby's heartbeat was faint, irregular. Rihanna sat outside the emergency room, clutching her hands together, whispering silent prayers. She didn't know this woman, didn't know her name or her story, but something inside her refused to walk away. After what felt like hours, the doctor emerged, his face grave but calm. "She's stable, for now. She's lost a lot of blood. The baby is under distress, but the heartbeat is still there. We'll monitor closely." Relief washed over Rihanna like a wave. "Thank you. Can she stay here tonight?" The doctor looked down. "She doesn't have any ID, no insurance. This isn't a charity hospital, sister. I've done what I could. We'll keep her until morning." Rihanna nodded silently, understanding. She had barely enough to feed herself on most days. Her flower stall barely paid the rent for her one-room home. But as she walked into the room and saw Eliza, bandaged, pale, trembling in her sleep, she knew what she had to do. The next morning, Rihanna returned with her old shawl and a thermos of warm lentil soup. When Eliza opened her eyes, dazed and confused, Rihanna smiled gently. "You don't know me," she said softly. "But I found you. You're safe now. Come with me, I have a place. It's not much, but it's warm, and I won't let anyone hurt you." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, but her lips parted only to whisper, "Thank you." For the first time in days, Eliza felt something unfamiliar but comforting. Hope. The roar of the private jet faded as Armand stepped out onto the mansion's driveway, his phone buzzing with unread messages and missed calls. The week-long business trip had been tense and exhausting, but nothing could prepare him for the eerie quiet that greeted him upon entering his home. No staff, no scent of Eliza's rosewater perfume, no sign of the soft music she often played. The silence gnawed at him. He loosened his tie, stepping into the living room where Sabine lounged casually on the velvet sofa in a silk robe, sipping wine as if she owned the place. Her legs were crossed, one perfectly manicured hand swirling the glass while the other rested possessively on the armrest where Armand usually sat. "You're back early," she said, smiling lazily. "Where's Eliza?" he asked, walking past her. Sabine's expression didn't change. "Gone." He turned slowly, brows furrowing. "Gone? What do you mean?" "She left 2 nights ago. Said she couldn't take it anymore. Something about how you don't love her, how she's tired of being ignored. She was screaming and crying. Very unstable." Armand blinked. "And no one stopped her?" "She's pregnant." Sabine stood and walked toward him. "I tried. I swear, Armand, I did. She was hysterical. I think the stress finally broke her. Maybe she never wanted the baby after all. Maybe she planned to leave." Her voice was soft, full of false concern, but something about the way she delivered her lines felt rehearsed. Too smooth. Too controlled. Armand's gut twisted. He looked around the room. No overturned chairs. No signs of a frantic exit. No packed bags. Eliza had always been gentle. If she'd truly left, she would have left a note, something, especially for the baby. "Did anyone see her leave?" he asked. Sabine hesitated for just a second too long. "No. It was late. Everyone was asleep." Armand didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the security console behind the stairwell, waking the screen. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he pulled up the footage from 2 nights ago. Sabine said Eliza left late. He narrowed the timeline. Hit play. The footage began in the hallway. Eliza stood there, visibly weak, one hand on her belly. Then Sabine appeared. Armand watched the confrontation unfold, the shouting, the argument he hadn't been there to hear. And then, the steel rod. His breath caught. He watched in stunned horror as Sabine raised it and struck Eliza. Again and again. The rod glinted under the chandelier as Eliza collapsed, sobbing, shielding her belly. Armand's heart pounded against his ribs. His hands clenched the console, knuckles white. Then came the dragging. The front door opening. Rain pouring in. And Sabine, his mistress, shoving his pregnant wife into the night like trash. The screen went black. He turned, and Sabine was standing there, face pale now, eyes wide. "You lied to me," he said quietly, voice shaking with rage. "Armand, He didn't let her finish. "You touched my wife. You put your hands on her. You could have killed my child." His voice broke on the last word. Without another glance at her, he stormed past, dialing his driver, his lawyer, anyone who could help him find Eliza. Panic surged in his chest. She could be anywhere. Alone. Bleeding. Or worse. And he had let it happen. The door to Sabine's room burst open with a violent crack, slamming against the wall so hard that the mirror above her dresser rattled. Sabine, caught mid-step in a satin robe, jumped and spun around, startled by the fury blazing in Armand's eyes. His jaw was clenched tight, his fists trembling as he marched in with his tablet in hand. The screen was still lit, paused on the frame where Eliza lay crumpled on the floor, her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. "Armand," Sabine said, trying to smile. "I can explain." But before another word left her lips, he threw the tablet at the bed. It bounced once and landed face up, still playing the security footage on a loop. "Explain." His voice was dangerously low. "I watched you beat my pregnant wife with a rod like she was nothing. You lied to me. You told me she ran away. I was trying to protect you." Sabine snapped, panic lacing her tone now. "She's been manipulating you for months. That baby, how do you even know it's yours?" She was ruining everything between us. Don't, Armand growled, stepping closer. Don't you dare speak about her like that. You tried to kill her. Sabine's eyes flickered with fear, but she tried to regain control. You weren't here. You don't know how unstable she's been. Always crying, always accusing. She wanted to make you feel guilty. I lost control for a second. A second? Armand seethed. You dragged her outside into the rain. You left her bleeding in the street. You could have killed both of them. He raised his hand, not in hesitation, not out of warning, but in a sudden flash of fury, and slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and final. Sabine stumbled back, stunned, a red mark blooming across her cheek. You're a monster, he said through clenched teeth. You think I'll ever look at you the same way again? I let you into my home, into my life, and you destroyed everything. Tears welled in Sabine's eyes, but Armand didn't care. The rage inside him had twisted into something deeper now, shame, regret, and fear. He pointed to the door. Get out. Get your things and leave this house. Right now. But. Now. She moved, slowly, quietly gathering a few things. For the first time, she saw it in his eyes, not just anger, but disgust. And she knew it was over. As the door closed behind her, Armand collapsed into the chair by the dresser, burying his face in his hands. The image of Elisa's bruised body haunted him. He had believed Sabine. He had doubted his wife. Turned his back on the woman carrying his child. And now she was gone, somewhere out there in pain, alone, and he had no idea if she was alive. He had failed her. Completely. And the guilt settled into his bones like lead, heavy and merciless. Armand hadn't slept in 3 days. His suit was wrinkled, his tie discarded long ago, and dark circles had formed beneath his eyes. He had gone to every clinic, every hospital, every corner of the city with one photo in hand, Elisa's. Some turned him away. Some pitied him. But most had no answers. The mansion felt colder without her, emptier. The echoes of her laughter, the soft rustle of her footsteps, it all haunted him now. He sat for hours in police stations filing reports, posted her photo across social media, hired private investigators, even bribed hospital staff for records. His voice, once firm and commanding, now cracked when he said her name. My wife, she's pregnant. Please, just check again. On the 4th day, his phone rang just past midnight. A nurse from a small local clinic finally called back. We had a Jane Doe come in 3 nights ago. No ID. Pregnant. Injuries from a beating. Discharged the next morning into the care of someone named Rihanna. Armand's heart stopped. He repeated the name as if it were a miracle. An hour later, his car screeched to a stop in a narrow, dimly lit street, puddles reflecting the dull glow of streetlights. He found the house, more a shack, really, with crumbling bricks and a rusted iron gate. His expensive shoes splashed through the mud as he rushed to the front door and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Then a voice, soft, uncertain, from within. Who is it? Please, Armand said, his voice breaking. I'm looking for my wife. Elisa. I was told she's here. The door creaked open, and an elderly woman peeked out, cautious. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the desperation on his face. You're her husband? Rihanna asked. Yes. Please, is she all right? Elisa turned her face to the wall, silent. The rejection was quiet, but it echoed louder than any scream. Rihanna stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Armand's shoulder. She's safe now, she said. That's what matters. But she's broken. And it's going to take more than apologies to fix her. Rihanna hesitated, then stepped aside silently. Armand entered the tiny one-room home. The walls were cracked, the furniture minimal, but it was clean and warm. In the corner, on a simple wooden cot covered with a worn blanket, lay Elisa. His heart clenched. She looked so small. Her face was pale and bruised, one arm in a bandage, her body curled protectively around her belly even in sleep. Her breathing was shallow. A bowl of untouched soup sat nearby. Armand dropped to his knees beside her, tears rushing to his eyes. "Aliza," he whispered, reaching for her hand. She stirred slowly, her lashes fluttering open. Her eyes met his, and widened with confusion, then fear. She tried to pull away, but her body was too weak. "No," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "No, don't touch me." His heart shattered. "It's me. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I should have protected you. I didn't know what she did. Please, Armand nodded, eyes still on the woman he loved. And for the first time in his life, he felt completely unworthy. Armand couldn't stop the tears as he knelt beside the cot once more, his hands clasped tightly together like a man praying for salvation. The sight of Aliza, bruised, hollow-eyed, and withdrawn, ripped through him like a blade. He had rehearsed 100 apologies in his mind, but now, faced with the wreckage of what he had allowed to happen, words felt like ash. "I failed you," he whispered, his voice cracked and raw. "I believed lies instead of your heart. I let someone else hurt you, hurt our baby. And I will never forgive myself for that." Aliza lay still, her eyes open but unmoving, fixed on the water stains on the ceiling. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. Her silence pressed into him like a wall of ice, making it harder to breathe. But he didn't stop. "I should have listened to you," he continued, his hands shaking. "I should have seen what was happening, but I was blind and selfish. I can't change what happened. But I swear to you, I will never let anyone touch you again. You're the mother of my child. You are my wife. And I will protect you with everything I have, starting now." Still, Aliza said nothing. Her hand, resting on her belly, twitched once as the baby moved beneath it. That simple gesture sent a surge of hope through Armand's chest, fragile but real. "I've arranged a private hospital," he said quietly. "The best doctors. A full security team. You'll be safe. You don't have to speak to me. You don't have to forgive me. But please, let me take care of you. Just let me make sure you both survive this." There was a long pause. Then slowly, without looking at him, Aliza nodded once. It was barely perceptible, but it was enough. Armand exhaled, not in relief, but in awe. She had given him that one sliver of permission. Not love, not trust, but the chance to try. He helped her gently into the car that night, wrapped in a blanket, cradled like something fragile that might shatter again if held too tightly. She didn't speak during the entire drive to the hospital. She didn't look at him. But she allowed herself to be carried inside. And that, for now, was everything. The very next morning, Armand stood in the police station with a heavy file in his hands, security footage, hospital reports, witness statements. His face, once polished and untouchable, was now grim with purpose. There would be no more silence. No more protection for the monster he had allowed into their lives. "I want to press full charges," he told the inspector. "Attempted murder. Assault with a deadly weapon. Unlawful eviction. Everything." The inspector glanced at the footage again, Sabine swinging the steel rod, Aliza's blood-curdling screams, her body curled in pain. He didn't hesitate. "We'll arrest her immediately." Within hours, Sabine's face was splashed across every news channel in the country. "Millionaire's mistress beats pregnant wife with steel rod," the headlines screamed. Social media erupted in outrage. Videos of Aliza entering the hospital, pale, fragile, accompanied by bodyguards, went viral. Thousands of women began posting with the hashtag Justice for Aliza, sharing their own stories of betrayal and abuse. Sabine was arrested outside a high-end salon, where she was getting her hair done, smiling for selfies. That smug smile vanished the moment handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She screamed Armand's name, called it all a lie, claimed Aliza had tricked him. But no one listened. Not anymore. Back in her hospital room, Aliza watched the headlines roll in on the small TV. Her hands trembled as she saw Sabine's face behind bars. The world had finally seen the truth. And for once, it believed her. The hospital phone rang. "We'd like to invite Mrs. Eliza Malik to speak at a National Women's Conference," the voice said. "Her story is a symbol of courage. She doesn't have to speak if she's not ready, but her presence alone would mean the world." Eliza didn't answer right away. She looked at her swollen belly, feeling the faint kick of life within her. Her voice had been taken from her once. But now, it was returning, slowly, powerfully. A day later, a photo surfaced of her seated upright in bed, draped in a pale shawl, face calm, gaze steady. The caption read, "The woman they tried to break." But she lived. And the world listened. The hospital lights flickered overhead as doctors rushed Eliza through the hallway on a stretcher. She gripped the sides of the bed, her face pale and drenched in sweat. The pain came in waves, sharp, merciless contractions that left her gasping. Nurses shouted instructions, the fetal monitor beeped erratically, and Armand was forced to let go of her hand as the doors to the delivery room slammed shut in his face. "She's only 34 weeks, a nurse had whispered earlier. "The trauma triggered early labor. We'll do everything we can." Armand sat outside the delivery room, his head in his hands, knees bouncing restlessly. His eyes were bloodshot, lips moving in silent prayers. Every scream that echoed from behind the door twisted his insides. He had money, power, security, but none of it mattered now. Not if it couldn't keep her alive. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. The sky outside turned dark. Armand remained frozen in place, consumed by guilt and fear. When the screaming stopped, his heart nearly did too. The door finally creaked open, and a nurse stepped out holding a tiny, swaddled bundle. Her smile was tired but genuine. "She's here," she whispered. "Your daughter. And your wife. She made it. Both of them are safe." Armand stood slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. The nurse gently placed the baby in his arms, a tiny warm being with a faint wisp of black hair and her mother's lips. She squirmed slightly, letting out the softest cry. Armand broke down. His tears fell silently onto the baby's blanket as he held her close, overwhelmed by a love so pure it hurt. He looked through the small glass window at Eliza, unconscious but breathing steadily. "We're still here," he whispered to his daughter. "Because she fought. For both of us." Sunlight poured into the modest but elegant new home nestled in a quiet neighborhood, far from the echoes of the mansion where everything had fallen apart. The walls were painted soft ivory, the furniture cozy and simple, chosen by Eliza herself. Every detail of the house felt like a step forward, a gentle reclaiming of her life. In the nursery, baby Lena giggled in her crib, batting at a mobile of wooden stars. Eliza sat beside her on a low armchair, humming softly as she folded tiny clothes. Her movements were still careful, scars from the trauma lingered, but there was peace in her rhythm now, a sense of control she hadn't felt in months. Armand visited every other day, always texting beforehand, never overstepping. He brought formula and diapers, and sometimes books on parenting. But mostly, he brought quiet support. He never asked for forgiveness again, never demanded closeness. He simply showed up, present, patient, and respectful. One afternoon, he handed her a slim envelope. "A trust fund," he said simply. "For Lena. And for you. No strings." Eliza didn't open it in front of him, but after he left, she found the documents, a secure fund in her name, one she could manage independently. She smiled faintly. It was the kind of gesture she once wished for, not in money, but in respect. With her new stability, Eliza founded an NGO called The Second Voice, dedicated to helping women trapped in abusive relationships. She hired legal advisors, counselors, and volunteers. Her story became the catalyst for something larger than herself. Every time she spoke to a woman trembling with fear, every time she handed over a care package or sat with someone in a shelter, Eliza grew stronger. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was leading. Late one evening, she watched Lena sleep peacefully and whispered, "You were born from pain, little one, but you'll grow in strength. The past hadn't disappeared. But Eliza was no longer defined by it. She was building something new, brick by brick, voice by voice, woman by woman. The charity gala was abuzz with soft music, glittering gowns, and flashes of cameras. Eliza stood near the entrance of the ballroom, wearing a deep emerald dress that flowed like water. Her presence turned heads, not just because of her grace, but because of her story. Survivors across the city now looked to her as a symbol of rising, of reclaiming power after pain. The second voice banner hung proudly across the stage, celebrating the work of her NGO. Guests clapped when her name was mentioned, and she accepted each compliment with calm poise. But when Armand approached from across the room, her smile faltered, just slightly. He looked different tonight. Not because of his tuxedo or the way he carried himself, but because of the humility in his eyes. In his arms, he held Lena, fast asleep against his chest in a white little dress, her tiny hand gripping the lapel of his coat. "I wanted to say, thank you," he began, voice low, "for letting me be part of her life. And for giving me a chance to fix what I broke. I know I don't deserve another one, but, is there hope? For us?" The question hung in the air. Eliza looked at her daughter, the child who had survived with her. The child born of chaos, yet now glowing with peace. She stepped forward and brushed a finger gently over Lena's soft cheek. "She's our future," Eliza said quietly, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. "But I am my own now." She looked up at Armand then, her expression unreadable. No bitterness. No affection. Just strength. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply gave him a small, knowing smile. And then, heels clicking softly against marble, she turned and walked away. In control. At last. The grand auditorium shimmered under crystal chandeliers, the air buzzing with anticipation. Women from across the country, activists, survivors, leaders, filled the seats, eyes turned toward the stage. Banners of empowerment lined the walls, and in the front row, a little girl in a yellow dress clapped her hands along with the music that played before the program began. Eliza stood behind the curtain, microphone in hand, heart steady. A year ago, she had been a woman broken in body and spirit. Now, she wore a crisp white suit, her chin held high, her story not a wound, but a weapon. As her name was announced, the crowd rose to its feet in admiration. She stepped into the spotlight, pausing briefly to look at her daughter, who beamed up at her, waving. That tiny wave gave her the last push she needed. She spoke of survival, not just of pain, but of the fight to reclaim one's identity after it. She talked about the work the second voice had done, shelters built, legal aid provided, voices amplified. "I was once silenced," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Once told that I was weak, emotional, unstable. They tried to bury me under lies, betrayal, and a steel rod. But I rose. And today." She paused, eyes sweeping the room, locking onto her daughter's gaze. "I want every woman here to remember this. They tried to break me with steel. But I became unbreakable." For a moment, there was silence. Then the room erupted, thunderous applause, women cheering, some wiping away tears. Eliza stepped back, letting the sound wash over her. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a storm they couldn't stop. And in that moment, she knew, her power no longer came from what she had endured, but from what she had become.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.